What was the speech impediment, and when did you discover that you had one?
Well, I discovered it as soon as I tried to talk for the first time.
Mhm.
I have a, and I still struggle with it. And you'll hear it now that I'm pointing it out. All right, and we'll
Mhm.
cover this in detail.
Mhm.
But it's a stutter. Some people call it a stammer. It's a stutter
Mhm.
where I basically get stuck on words and certain sounds and consonant combinations that
Right.
I can't get them out.
Mhm.
And I had that from my very earliest childhood, as far back as my memory goes, that speaking was very, very difficult, to the
Mhm.
point that it was nearly impossible to speak at all. And I could not read aloud at all. I could read, but I couldn't
Right.
read aloud
Mhm.
at all. And a lot of that was the anxiety of getting stuck and hearing the laughter of kids. You know, kids are cruel.
Oh,
Somebody
yeah.
does that, then they start laughing at me, and they start mimicking and mocking you. Come here, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And you get, it's just, so you just don't want to try to talk because
Right.
people are always making fun of you. And
Mhm.
here's a funny story. It was so bad in high school. I was the quarterback on the football team, but I couldn't call the plays
Oh, no.
in the huddle, right? So the coach would send in a flanker or a wide receiver
Right.
every play with the play, and he would call the play in the huddle. I mean, I could say down set hut, right?
Right.
That's
Mhm.
pretty easy,
Right.
or get the cadence out in order to do that. But I could not, and all the rush and anxiety that's happening
Right.
in a football game,
Mhm.
I couldn't call the plays. So the coach would send in a flanker with the play. He would call the play, and then we'd go up and run the play. All the way back, as far as I could remember, I had this really severe speech impediment. And now I'm going to explain how I've learned to control it a little bit.
Okay.
Is a speech therapist
Oh,
helped a lot. And back in those days, Cole, they would come and take you out of class, and you would go and spend an hour with the speech therapist,
mhm.
and she would, do all these techniques. So I went, like I said, we moved around a lot, so I had a lot of different therapists. Well,
Mhm.
it so happened when we moved to Straw, South Carolina, my aunt was my therapist, and she
Okay.
quickly identified that there were certain consonant combinations and certain word combinations that caused me the most trouble.
Right.
Now, a lot of words cause me trouble,
Mhm.
but what she said was, "All right, Pete, let's see if we can figure out how you can avoid some of these hangups." And so she taught me how to substitute words in certain situations. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
I have to stop to say the word, and I have to say it slow so you can hear me.
Mhm.
Anytime there's a L and a T close to one another, I get stuck.
Ah,
Yeah, think of what your tongue does. L.
yeah.
So words like little,
Mhm.
right? You see how I had to stop to say that?
Yeah.
When I'm just in regular conversation, I'm going to say small,
Right.
even though the other word's better,
Mhm.
right? And she taught me how to very quickly be thinking ahead of what I'm going to say and come up with
Mm.
ways to substitute. And she also taught me what I now term micro pauses, which you will probably notice now that I've pointed them out to you.
Mhm.
But what I do is, when I am thinking of what I want to say, and I know that there's a word or a phrase that's going to be difficult, I will place micro pauses between those words
Right.
so that I can get them out. And I disguise that as trying to enunciate and speak slow.
Mhm.
But by enunciating and speaking slow, I'm also putting in little pauses that allows my tongue to reset and to say what I need to say.
Mhm.
Okay.
Wow.
So, and I'm a public speaker. I go and
Right.
speak at men's conferences and all
Right.
over the country. I do podcasts and things. And usually only when I tell people do they know that I have a struggle. But I know it. I feel it when I'm editing my podcast. I'm cutting it out.
Mhm.
Right. And if I were to ever publish one raw, you would hear it because I told you about it.
Mhm.
Right. Um, and So that's how I'm able to handle it, right? So when I would
Mhm.
like when I'm preaching at a church, for example, or speaking at a men's conference, I memorize what I'm going to say. I write it out and read it out loud and see if I can actually say it the way that I wrote it. And if I can't, I have to change the writing so that I can speak it. It may be horrible grammatically to read it,
Right.
but it's words that I can say and in combinations that I can say.